Hello and welcome to this exclusive training video for my newest Procreate pack, the Gnome Creator Pack. Number one, just want to welcome you guys and thank you for the purchase. The idea for this video is to kind of walk you through all the different possibilities for this pack, show you how to get the most out of the purchase and show you what's possible. So starting out here, just going to kind of assume that you've already got all the brushes loaded into Procreate. If you're not to that part yet or you're confused on how to do that, I'm not going to spend any time in this video doing that. You can actually go over to my website. I'll link this in the description below. I've already got a video up there that kind of walks you through how to install a Procreate brush set. And there's also a video too that I'll link that shows you how to install the palettes as well. If you don't know how to do that, there are palettes included with this brush set, so I want you to be able to get those in there. But come back to this video once you do that, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So the size of the canvas today that I'm using is a 3000 by 3000 300 DPI canvas. It's an RGB canvas. If you go through these tutorials or you start using some of these techniques and you find out that you're running out of layers, you just pretty much need to make a smaller canvas. The size and type of your iPad is really gonna depend on kind of shape the number of layers that you have available in Procreate. So to begin with, you'll see that I've got these brushes all divided down here by categories. So we've got hats, beards, noses, so on and so forth. I did these separate just because having them all in one folder is kind of complicated and a chore to go through 100 different brushes to find the exact one that you're looking for. So breaking them down like this, yeah, they take up more room over here in the library, but it's gonna speed up your workflow. So with these brushes then, they're also size adjustable. So the top slider over here is going to adjust the size. You'll see this one's going to be pretty big starting out, maxed out, but then we can drop the size depending on how big we want it on our canvas or depending on our canvas size. So with this first half of the tutorial, I'm going to do just a kind of traditional lined cartoon version of the gnome. Second half, we're going to work on the rendered one, not using lines. So we'll start out with a hat, and I think I want to go ahead and use hat number 5. Let's use that one to start out with, and just tapping brings that in to our work area, onto our canvas. And you'll see here, I'm just kind of playing with the sizes to get the right size hat. Of course, if you are experienced with Procreate, you'll know you can go up here to the arrow and kind of resize and drag this out. But I like to do it with the slider first just because that makes sure that nothing pixelates. You might know if you start kind of playing around, adjusting sizes in Procreate, making them bigger and smaller, it is going to start to pixelate eventually. So getting them as close as you can with the slider is the way you want to start out. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab the arrow here, and I'm just going to kind of position this towards the top. Just using the arrow by itself won't pixelate anything. I just kind of want it centered there. We can't really use the center line like we usually would because you'll see that the center here that we're going for is not actually the center of the clip art here itself. So we want to just kind of eyeball that, or we could also turn on symmetry, but we'll just keep it there for now. So all right, we've got the hat in there. Next up, let's go ahead and do the beard. So I'm going to go up here to my layers menu. I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to come back to my brush library, and we're going to go down to beards. And let's go ahead, I'm trying to think. Let's go with beard number 6. Pretty basic, plain one. Once again, super huge, so we can drop the size of this down just till we get exactly what we're going for. And then we can use the arrow to kind of fine tune exactly where that's going to go. All right, there we go. And you'll see we've got a couple of overlapping lines here, but that's okay. We don't have to worry about that because we're going to take care of that here in a little bit. And that's part of kind of the beauty behind this and why I wanted to do the tutorial. All right, next up, let's do the nose. So once again, coming back up here to the layers menu, we're going to go ahead and make a new layer. Back over to my brush library. We're going to go down to noses, and then doesn't really matter what you choose here. Just go ahead and slap a nose in. That looks actually pretty good size-wise. Grabbing the arrow again, just kind of position that there towards the middle. Come back up now to our layers menu again. Plus for a new layer. We're going to tap this one, and then we're going to go ahead. Oops, sorry. We're going to go over to our brush library. We're going to tap. Now, bodies is the next one up. If you are in the whole universe of knowing the gnome trend, you'll know sometimes the gnomes have bodies. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you can't see them past their beard. So this is where kind of your style comes in. Do you want it to have a body? Do you not want it to have a body? Totally up to you. So I think for this one, we're going to skip the body and we're just going to use the beard. So we'll go down next to gnome feet. And let's go ahead and use, say, number 4. That one looks pretty good. Go ahead and tap this. Of course, those are going to be a little bit too big. Tap it again. Now you'll see too with these, they're kind of close together. And I kind of want them to come out a little bit further. So like this one here on the left, that's where I kind of want it to hit that beard. Now, this one obviously comes a little bit too close there. So what we can do, we go ahead, just tap over here somewhere in the menu to lock that in. We can go ahead now and grab our selection tool with freehand selected down here. We can just kind of lasso this. Coming back up to our arrow, we can drag this off to the side. So now they're wider apart and they kind of hit exactly on both sides. So that looks really good, I think. That's a kind of tip there. You'll see with the shoes, I've got them spaced out already. With the hands, I kept those separate so you could use different shapes of hands. But with the feet and the shoes, I went ahead and just did the set, the left and the right. So if you want to just kind of maneuver those around, that selection tool and then the arrow to move them. So keep that in mind. Next up, we've got arms. Once again here with arms, some gnomes in this trend have them, some gnomes don't. It's up to you, the style that you're using. With this one, I think we're not even gonna worry about the arms on this. We'll just go ahead and make one of the main traditional ones that you see quite a bit now. So that's gonna mean that we're gonna skip down to hands. With hands, here I kind of want to get the accessory in here first. And to know where to place the hands, we'll need the accessory in first. So we're gonna come back to hands. We're gonna come down to accessories. With this one, I really kind of want to do a Christmas style gnome. So let's go ahead and use the package right here. And then we'll go ahead and adjust the size of this package. And you'll see here, it's on the feet layer because I forgot to make a new layer. So every time that we do a new tap of the brush, we're going to want to make a new layer because we want to be able to position this with the arrow. And if it's on a layer with another layer, we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to kind of position that right there. Tapping again. Up here just locks it in. So now we need the hands. So once again, new layer here. Tapping on the brush library then and coming back to hands. And I think I'm going to use this number 2 right here. It's kind of a mitten with the fingers in the mitten kind of wrapped around. So if we go ahead and tap this and kind of get it in the right position here. Shrink it down just a tad bit. That looks pretty good. So that's going to be our right hand, of course. Now we need the left. And you'll see with these, there's only one position of these. There's not a left and a right. So for here, all we need to do is we need to come back up to our layers menu. We're going to go ahead and slide this layer to the left, and we're going to duplicate it. So now we've got 2 of those. And with that top one selected, we're going to go ahead and grab our arrow. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and flip it horizontally. So now we've got the right hand and we've got the left one that we're moving over. Once we get that positioned, just tapping up here is going to lock those in. All right, so this is going to be our basic design that we're using now. I'm going to go ahead, you don't need to do this section. I'm going to go ahead and group these together. because I want to be able to use this same design for that second part of the tutorial we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. So now we've got one saved for later on. And this then is what we just did. So don't worry about the grouping, just pay attention to this. So now you'll see we've got all these overlapping lines. So now we just really need to come in here and erase. That's also why we kept these all on separate layers, because we can erase those overlapping lines without touching the lines of the things that it's overlapping with. So I'm going to start with the beard, just because that's kind of what sticks out to me there in the center of the nose. So using an eraser, doesn't matter what you use. I'm just going to go ahead for this tutorial. I'm just going to use a studio pen and inking. Whenever I do anything like this, I prefer using my cartooning set. It's a different paid set, but I don't want to use a paid set within a paid set video. So if you do have that cartooning set from me, my main brush that I usually use are the standard inker and the streamline inker. But like I said, we're just going to go ahead and use the studio pen today for this one. And I'm just going to use this to erase that overlap there of the beard. And sticking with the beard, go ahead and erase these overlaps here inside the present and the hand. And personally here, you'll see this little line there coming up. If you want to erase some little lines like that, if they look a little bit off, you can always do that too. It just really depends what shows up. These parts erased here, inside the present. Inside the glove. I think that looks good. Next up then, we go ahead and go to the hat. Now here, once again, this is personal preference. Sometimes with this gnome trend, sometimes the beard extends up over top of that hat. Sometimes it comes down underneath the hat. Once again, totally up to you how you want to do it. I think with this one, I'll have it come up over top of the hat. So you'll see now this extends past. Otherwise, we would have erased the beard here and the hat would have come down and over. So again, just personal preference, whatever you want to do. All right, next up, let's do the present. Grab that and erase the overlaps here with the mittens. And last, we've got the feet there. So back up to our layers menu, over to the feet. Erase those overlaps with the beard. All right, and that's what we're left with. I think I've got a little dot of the beard right here I need to get. So there are our lines for design. Now that we've got all these set, what we can do is we can come back up here and then we can just pinch together all of these. So these are all now on one. All one. From here then, we're ready to start coloring in, and that's where we do the color flats. So I'm gonna go ahead and come down here, and I'm gonna make a new layer underneath our layer one. This layer one here, we're gonna go ahead and tap on this, and we're gonna set this as a reference. So what this is gonna do, it's going to allow us to drag and drop our colors here onto this. Yours will probably say layer 2. This says layer 11 for me because I grouped all those. Actually, it'll probably say layer 7 maybe because we did all these other ones, but regardless of that, let's go ahead and use this as our color flats layer. So we've got this set as reference. We just need to pick our colors now. So once again, color palettes, I've got all these different color palettes here for the set that I made. You'll have all these if you installed all of them. We're just gonna go ahead and use that Christmas one to set a color palette. you'll see we're gonna just hit this one because it's not ours. It'll give you the option to set as default. This one I've already got set as default, so it doesn't have that option. But what that means is when you go over to the disk view, then it's gonna come up here in the bottom. So we can kind of just start picking our colors. I've got this one for the nose, so we can drag and drop there. Now, one thing I've talked about before in my videos on YouTube, and if you have not seen those, definitely check them out. But as you drag and drop colors here, you might see sometimes that you'll have like a white line around the edge to where it doesn't go clear up to the edge. Here it's not really showing up too much. But if you're experiencing that, or if you're dragging and dropping colors and it's filling in everything, it all depends on this color drop threshold up here that shows up once you drag and drop. So you'll see as I start to hold down my pencil and then drag this, that blue line will start to get bigger there. We want this to be pretty close to the edge, but not all the way, because that's going to fill in everything. So like I said, if you are experiencing that kind of gap there of white, it just means that you need to up that color drop threshold, dragging and dropping, and then sliding the pencil there to the right as you go. All right, so we've got the nose. Next up, let's go ahead and do the hat. For this, I'm going to go ahead and use this green color here. We'll throw that in. For the beard, let's go ahead and kind of use this cream color for the beard. Now you'll see, because we have lines here that kind of block that off, we've got to drag and drop a few times. If you don't want to keep repeating that process, another tip here is you can drag and drop, and you'll see continue filling with recolor comes up there. You'll see this little cursor here that you can drag around. And then now, when you tap, it's going to fill in. It makes it a lot quicker if you've got multiple things to do. And you'll see once I switch here, I'm still kind of on that, so it's going to change until I click off of that. Back up to my color palette then. Let's go ahead and let's see. This bright yellow, we'll use that for the package. Once again, you can see here I can tap this and then just fill that in really quick, just like that. Makes it a lot faster. For the gloves, let's go ahead and just use a darker green for those. Get those filled in. For the bow, I think we're going to go ahead and use a red. And I think we'll use that red too over here on the edge of that. And then finally, we've got the shoes. Those, let's go ahead and use, this is kind of more of a darker red. I'm going to pull this up just a little bit here. I've got some browns in some of the other color palettes. I kind of want these to be a little bit lighter than that. So these color palettes that I used are basically more for the base colors of the gnome itself. If you want different color shoes, feel free to hop in there onto the color wheel and pick some other colors too. Or like I said, you can switch over to one of these that have those browns in it. And then just a darker version of that color for the soles here. All right, and then pulling out, that's what we're left with. Of course, this is a totally suitable design. If you don't want to go ahead and add or embellish to it, you could just stop the design here, go on to the next one. I think this looks good as is, but if you want to even go further with it, make it pop more, we can go ahead and add shadows and highlights, and that's going to be the next step. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to come back up here to our layers menu, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. So this is on top of the color flats, but it is underneath the lines layer. I'm going to tap this one, and I'm going to set this as clipping mask. So what this allows us to do is we can add shadows to this layer, and they're only going to show up on the parts that we have colored in on layer 11. So if we color over here, nothing's going to show up. It's only going to show up over here. The importance of this and why it's nice is because since it's a separate layer, we can adjust the opacity to it without affecting those colors down on layer 11. And also we can make changes, change the color of the shadows later on Once again, since they're a separate layer, they're not going to affect layer 11 here. It's a non-destructive action since it's on a separate layer. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead, coming back up to our color palette. I think I'm just going to use this dark blue, this navy color down here. We'll use that for the shadows. And then for the brush, once again, here's where I would use my standard inker brush for my cartooning pack. But like I said, I want to keep this all with the base stuff that comes with Procreate. So I don't like this one as much, but let's go ahead and use inking and Studio Pen. I'm gonna kind of zoom in here so you can see it a little bit better. And from here, I've talked about this in a lot of my videos too. I want to decide where the light source is coming from. This is going to help us determine where the shadows go, where the highlights go. And on this particular design, I think we'll have the light source coming in from this top right-hand corner. As you can see, nothing's happening over there because I've got that clipping mask on. It only shows up over here. So that means highlights are going to be on this right side. Shadows then are going to fall here on the back left. So now that we've got that decided, we can kind of start to come in here. One thing I am going to do here is I'm going to turn off reference on that first layer just so I can kind of get some pretty big areas blocked in and drag and drop the shadow in there. Once I have all those lines connected, I can fill that color. If we have reference still turned on, it's just going to fill it like it did with the color flats here. So back to my brush, and I'm just going to pull down some shadows here. And you'll see I'm just kind of following along with the way that the lines go from that design that we just made. Once I have those connected, then I can drag and drop that color in. See, that fills in quickly. And then twisting and turning the canvas as I go. Start to add shadows here on the back side of that nose. Of course, the underneath side of the nose is going to have a shadow too. I don't want that to really come in on the bow just yet, so we'll erase there. Pull up a shadow here where that connects underneath. Drag and drop that in. Just kind of continue this down and around. Of course, here we're going to have a shadow underneath the box. Shadow here on this side. You'll see with the eraser then, I'm going to kind of line up the curve of that with that other line there. As I go in here too, I've got the light source here. I'm going to start to add shadows on the left-hand side of these lines of the beard. Like I said, following that curve, and then going back in with my eraser and just kind of touching up so that they meet up a little bit better. All right, same thing here. We'll do some shadows underneath the hands where they're holding the present. Shadows on the underside of these mittens on the left. Get a pretty big shadow here. We are going to come back in and touch this up though. This is not going to be a solid shadow. A little bit of a shadow here. Shadows here at the bottom of the shoe and on the sole. Underneath the lid of the box, that's going to have a shadow as well. And then we can get the back sides then of these lines here. One there and one here. We can also hit, if we want to, on the ribbon here, we can hit the back sides of those. And with this, honestly, it's up to you how much detail you want to put into it, how much time and effort you want to put into doing shadows and highlights. To be honest, with these gnomes especially, a lot of the times they stay a little bit more simple in their designs. So you can get away with kind of, you know, spending a little bit less time on these. If you've watched my YouTube channel before, you know I like to go in and do a lot of shadows and highlights, but it's totally up to you as well on this one. Hitting this back side then of the hat. Just like that. I think this one I'm going to kind of pull this even further out with that line. All right. Now that we've got this done, let's go ahead and come back up here to our layers menu. And with that layer selected, we're going to tap the N here. That brings up the blend mode. And we're just going to drag down the opacity of this. So you can see now, instead of that dark midnight blue, we've got this nice shadow going on. I think probably about 24, 25%. Looks pretty good there. Go ahead and lock that in. All right. Now, with my eraser, I'm going to come back in here and kind of remove some of these shadows. So like I said, with this foot here, it's totally shadowed in, but you can't really tell it's shadowed in because there's no other value there. There's only one value. There's not an extra one sitting next to it. So if we remove some of the shadow now, you can actually tell, okay, wait, that's actually, yeah, I see that's got a shadow there just because it's got that kind of rim light to it. So just by pulling out some of those shadows will help you show the viewer that, yes, there is in fact a shadow there. Same thing here with this beard. There's a pretty big area that filled in. So if I just pull out a couple of those shadows there, you're going to be able to tell that it is indeed kind of shaded in there. And with this, we can kind of fix some things here if we see something that needs changed, or if we want to remove, you know, a shadow here along the edge. Once again, show that there is a shadow there. Totally up to you how you want to do that. A lot of shadow back here on this red, so I'm going to pull some away from that too. All right. Finally, just kind of want to work on this bow here underneath. Some shadow in there coming around, so it's not just a solid red right there. A little bit of shadow here on the back of the present. And along the back side of the bow and the ribbon. All right. So that's pretty much it for the shadows. From here then, we're ready to move on to the highlights. This works just the same way that shadows did. So we're going to come up here to our layers menu. We're going to go ahead and make a new layer. You're going to tap that once again, set it as clipping mask. So even though these are stacked on top of each other, they still point down to the same layer down here. Now, coming back up to our color palette, I think we're just going to use this yellowish cream that we use then for the beard. We'll use that as our highlight color here. Switching back to our brush. Once again, light source coming in this way. So we're just going to kind of pull in some highlights following that same curve. And you'll see here as this line kind of juts back out, I'm going to extend this so you kind of get the idea that that's coming back in on itself. We can also use that same technique down here for a fold. If we just do a quick kind of curve line like that, we can give that look of a fold right there. Continue to hit these sides here to the right. Down here with the shoes too, we can even do some kind of oval highlights to make those look a little bit more shiny. And then from here, I think we're ready to drop the opacity. So if we go up here to the layers menu, once again, hit the N for blend mode, drop this down. This one doesn't need to come as low as the previous one, probably in the 40s. Looks pretty good for this one. Then I also want to add some highlights to the nose. The reason why I didn't do it on the same layer here is because the nose is a lot lighter of a color than what the hat and the shoes are. So the opacity needed, dropping that down, is not going to be the same. So we're going to control that separately with another layer. I am going to switch over to white though for the highlights on the nose. I'm going to come back up to the layers menu and I'm going to go ahead, once again, making a new layer. This one, we don't really even have to set it as clipping mask because I'm going to be right in the center. I'm not going to go outside of this. So I'm not even going to worry about setting it as that. Holding my pencil down as I make an oval locks it into a perfect oval. Just do another one there. And that's a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go ahead and once again go up to the layers menu and for blend mode and drop that down just to about there. And I think that looks pretty good. I think the one thing I am going to do here with the shadows, and this is one of those things, once you kind of get to the end of a design, you can kind of see something that looks a little wonky. I'm going to pull this shadow back here. It just looks a little off. I'm going to have this one kind of taper down there to the end. I think that looks a little bit better. Just like that. All right. And there we go. That's pretty much it for the design. That's what I would call a finished design. So if we look at this, then we've got our layer here of our lines. Once again, we went back in and erased the overlapping ones from there. We've got our color flats and then 2 clipping masks, 1 for shadows and 2 for highlights. From here then, we're ready to go ahead and send this out, export it however you would like. For that, if you're new to Procreate, just coming up here to the wrench icon and going to share gives you all these different options. The thing that I probably use the most for the things that I do, print on demand, coloring books, stuff like that, would be to export this as a PNG or a PNG. With that though, what we would want to do is we want to turn off this background color. So we just have a transparent background. If we left that white on there, when you send that out, it's going to have that white around it. So let's say you would put that on, a black t-shirt. Well, it's going to print out that square white background plus this. By turning off this background, it's just going to print out our gnome as long as we export it as that PNG or PNG. So there we go. That is how we do kind of that traditional line drawing. From here then, we're going to go back in, use what we just did at the beginning step. That's why I did that new group. And I'm going to show you how to do a render design using those same starting building blocks. Okay, so to begin this outlineless kind of rendered type of design, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this initial stuff that we did. And now we're left with what I made duplicates of, just the shapes here. And we haven't done any erasing, and we're not going to. We want these overlaps here to stay. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically make each of these individual layers kind of like a filled in shape. So let's start with the hat here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to our color palette. Once again, we're going to use let's use the green, but I'm going to change some stuff up with this one and show you how to use those buffalo plaid PNGs or PNGs as well. So the first thing we need to do here, layer 1, we're going to stay on the layer this time. We're not going to make a new layer. We're going to drag and drop the color in here. And I'm also going to fill in those here too, those little triangles off to the side. Now we want to get rid of those lines. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back up to the layers. We're going to tap on this. We're going to select it, tap on it again, and we're going to go to fill layer. So you see now the entire thing is filled with that green. However, like I said, I want to do buffalo plaid on this hat. So what I'm going to do here is if I go up here to the plus icon, we're going to make a new layer. Once again, we're going to set this as clipping mask. So anything that we do on this layer is going to show up on the parts that are colored in here. And we're going to go ahead and tap on our wrench icon, and we're going to go to add, and we're going to insert a file. Now you can see here, I've already got these in a Gnome Creator folder on my iPad. So if I go to the Buffalo Plaid PNGs, and we'll just do the green here, it's going to bring it in, and you're going to see then it clips down to what we have colored in here. So that's how you're going to use those if you want to fill in, you know, a hat or mittens or a body with these. The pattern here is kind of big right now, so if I hit the arrow here, we can go ahead and shrink this down so that we have more of that pattern visible. From here too, if you don't want it to look, you know, perfectly straight up and down, we've got the, you know, perfect horizontal and vertical lines here. We could always use warp now. We've still got that arrow selected, and we can kind of pull down the corners here and up so that these curve around a little bit more, so that it's not just a perfectly straight line across there. You see this kind of curves with that flow that we've got going on with that initial line. Now going back up to our layers, we can just tap that, kind of lock it in there. All right, so that's the hat. Next up, we've got the beard. So let's go ahead and to our color palette again. Got that kind of cream color there. We'll fill that in. Once again, going up here, tapping here, select, tapping again, and fill layer. That's going to fill in that beard. Got the nose next, so moving up, we're going to tap on that. Color palette again. Got our color here. Drag and drop. Tapping again to our layers, and this is just basically repeating this process over and over again with the colors we're choosing. So tapping this, select, tapping it again, fill layer. Now we've got our shoes. So once again to our colors. I've got the color in the history here, so I can use that there. I'm going to drag and drop these in here. I'm going to continue filling in with recolor. And we're going to do the soles the same color here. Now if we want things different colors, that's going to come later on. So if you would fill these in a different color right at this step, and then once you go in here and you select and fill, it's going to fill it in regardless with that same one color. So we'll select this layer. Tapping again, we're going to hit fill layer. Now, this is where it's important to understand the layer hierarchy here. So these shoes now, you see they're covering up the beard. We want them to be behind the beard. So if we tap and hold on that and bring them down below here, you'll see they automatically turn to clipping mask here. So we just need to tap those, turn off clipping mask. Now, the shoes are behind the beard. So understanding the order layer here is really important at this step of the process. And we want to make sure that we continue on as we go here, making sure everything is lined up where it's supposed to be. So with the present selected here, choose that yellow. We'll get this filled in. Once again here, we are not going to be able to make the ribbon a different color right now. So we're just going to fill it all in yellow. We can worry about the red here later. So we're going to tap this, select, tap the layers again, tap that again, fill layer. Now for our gloves. And with this, I want these to kind of match the hat. So I'm just going to select that green just by holding down. I can select the green. Go ahead and drag and drop in here. Oops, and I hit the kind of fuzzy fur there. Selecting it, tapping again, fill layer. Same thing here. Dragging and dropping. tapping it, select, tap it again, fill layer. All right, and there we go. So these are basically all of the different brushes that we use. They're just kind of solid now. So once again here, some of these designs in this trend or this niche stay super simple. So this could be something that you say, hey, I think that looks good. I'll just leave it like this, and you could. That's perfectly fine. But we can make this kind of pop even more, make it look even more rendered. And that's what we're gonna do next by adding, once again, those shadows and those highlights. It's gonna work just a tad bit different this time though. So we need to go ahead and decide once again, where's our light source coming from? I think we'll just keep it the same, having it come in from that top right-hand corner. And then we can start adding in these shadows and highlights. So I think I'm gonna start with the nose. So if I go up to my layers menu, I'm gonna go ahead and select my nose layer here. I'm gonna go ahead and make a new layer. Once again, I'm gonna tap this. I'm gonna set this as clipping mask. And then for this, I'm just gonna choose maybe like one of these pink colors here. And once again, with that studio pen, you can use that, or if you want to, on this step, you could also go to airbrushing and use one of the airbrush ones here. I think with this though, I am gonna stick with the studio pen. If I can find it. Like I said, I don't really use this all that much, so I know it's under inking. There we go, studio pen. Now this doesn't look rendered right now. It's just, once again, almost like that cell shading that we did before, but we're gonna fix that here. So if we go up to our adjustments layer here and go to Gaussian blur, we slide this to the right, you can see that starts to kind of blend that in. From here, if we want to use the arrow, then we can kind of, with freeform selected, we can kind of pull that back and adjust it a little bit more. And there we go. We've got a really kind of nice flow to that shadow. And we're going to go in and add a little bit more to that here later. I'm just starting out with these base colors right now. Back up to our layers menu then. Let's go ahead and do the beard next. We tap on that, once again, making a new layer. Tapping on this new layer, setting that as clipping mask. We can do that. The other thing that you can do as well, if you know that you don't really need to adjust the opacity of the shadow once you lay it down, you could also use alpha lock, and then you wouldn't have to do the adjustments with the arrow. But just keep in mind that does save layers, but it's also destructive. It's going on the exact same layer. Now we just need a good kind of color for this. So selecting this as our base, then I'm just going to kind of get a darker color here. So I'm just kind of pulling the wheel to the right and then pulling the inside circle down. Once again, still with that studio pen, I'm just going to kind of come in here, pull along, just like we did the shadows before. Same basic idea as far as where these are going. Pull that down. All right. Now once again, back up here to the adjustments layer. Gaussian blur here. Sliding that to the right and then grabbing the arrow again, just kind of pulling it back just a little bit here. All right. Now with this, I can also add a new layer on top of this one and set this as clipping mask. And I can go in here, once again with that studio pen, and get some of these kind of beard lines. I didn't want to do this on the exact same layer because I want to adjust these a little bit different. So we can pull some of these in. Once Once again, back up here to Gaussian blur. And I'm also going to warp these just a tad bit here. There we go. And you can see kind of what I'm left with there. All right, next up, let's go ahead and do the shoes. Now, if we want these soles to be a different color, you can do that. This is where you would do this at. So, once again, here we're going to make a new layer. Set this as clipping mask as well. Select this color here just by holding down, and then select a darker color. And then I'm just going to drag a line across here. Give those soles that different color. All right, there we go. That's what we're going to do for the package as well with that ribbon coming down. All right, so now we can go ahead and add in some shadows here. So it's again coming back up here to the color palette. So come back down here to a darker color. We're going to come down to the base color of the shoes. Once again, another new layer. Since we made this on top of this one, but below this one, you'll see it automatically sets to clipping mask. We don't even have to do anything. We can pull in some shadows on these. All right, back up to adjustments, Gaussian blur. Sliding these. And then that might be a little bit too dark, so if we go back up to our layers menu and hit that N for blend mode, once again, we can adjust the opacity of that if we don't want it super, super dark. All right, so there's that. Next up, let's go ahead and do the mittens. So with this one, we can actually go ahead and combine these mittens into one. Save a layer here. Looks like I've got a little dot over here I need to erase. All right, once again, plus icon for a new layer. We're going to tap that, set it as clipping mask. Select our green color, pulling up on the color wheel here, just dropping down to a darker, like blackish green. Come in here and give this some shadow. So we've got that done. Once again, back up here, adjustments, Gaussian blur. Slide that. We drop the opacity just a tad bit. There we go. All right, package is next. So back up to our layers menu. We're going to go to the package here. We'll make a new layer. Tap this one, and you guessed it, we're going to set as clipping mask. I'm going to go ahead and select that red that we used before. We'll just color this in by hand here. And this might take a few attempts or getting in really close because you want to make sure you don't hit the top of the package there. There's that. This down, drag and drop, color in there. I think I had the top one a little bit wider too on that previous one, so you can do that as well there. All right, there we go. Now we need to actually do the shading here. So once again, coming back up here, tapping on the package. Actually, let's go on the bow. Let's do this one first. We're going to do this on a couple of different ones. So if we do a new layer, once again, set this as clipping mask. Let's go ahead and select the yellow and just get kind of a darkish brown here. Then I'm going to hit underneath here first. Once again, I want to make sure that don't go all the way up too far. And then Gaussian blur under the adjustments layer. With the arrow then, we can drag this down. So that stays there, breaks that up like that. And then back up to our layers again with another new layer, setting this as clipping mask. We can go ahead and pull in another shadow here off to the side. Adjustments, Gaussian blur. Now you see it starts to give that a nice three-dimensional look to it. Just like that. The other thing is here too, if we want to give these shoes down here kind of more definition, we can add a second layer like we did there. So if we go in on top of the shoes, make another new layer and hit clipping mask here, you can use that same dark brown and kind of pull in here where these come in. I think there was a line there that did that under the other version. I'm gonna go darker with this so that we have that little crease fold right there. Now coming back up here to adjustments, we can use Gaussian blur again and give that crease look right there. If we want to fine tune that even more with our eraser, this is where I would use airbrushing. Just kind of go in here to sharpen that up a little bit. Now I got a nice crease in there, kind of separates those a little bit more. All right, let's go ahead then. I want to separate the bow a little bit. So back up to the package one once again. Another new layer here that, since we're in between, automatically is set to clipping mask. I'm gonna grab that darker color. I don't think it saved it, to be honest with you, but let's do I think I'm gonna select actually a darker color, this red, for this one. I'll pull one in here too on this bottom. Back up to adjustments, Gaussian blur. That's going to separate those a little bit more too. There we go. You can also get away with using the airbrush to get some finer areas done real quick. So if we use that soft airbrush here, if we want to kind of pull in here, we can get that same kind of feeling that we're getting from that Gaussian blur just by using that really light. Once again, these are pressure sensitive. If you have the Apple Pencil, the airbrush is really super pressure sensitive, so you can kind of build up some three-dimensional qualities by using that as well. All right, finally we got the hat, so let's add in a little bit up there. So where's the hat? Very bottom. I'm gonna make a new layer. Set this as clipping mask again. We're just gonna go in, actually, I wanna make the end here a different color, so let's make that red. So we'll get that colored in there. Now another new layer that we're gonna set as clipping mask as well. We'll go in with black on this one. Just kind of hit the back side of this. Get this a little bit more shadowed in. And this one we definitely will have to adjust the opacity on this. All right. So once again, adjustments, Gaussian blur. Slide that to the right, and then back up to our layers menu, hitting the N for blend mode, just dropping that down ever so slightly. You don't want it too dark. All right. That looks good there. Next up, let's go ahead then. Let's do some highlights here. So if we go, starting with the hat, I suppose. Go ahead and also with the hat here, before we do anything else with that layer we were just on, let's just add in with the airbrush a couple of shadows here to that red there at the end, just because it looks pretty bland right now. So we can just go in real lightly with that airbrush to make that pop a little bit more. All right. So once again with the hat here, making a new layer. This might be where you start to run out of layers because we are getting quite a few in here depending on the iPad you have. Clipping mask with this one. And back up. I'm going to use this color that we use for the beard here. Just pull down there. Once again, Gaussian blur. Sliding that to the right, and then using the arrow to kind of reposition that towards the edge. If that's too bright, which I think right here it probably is, coming back up to layers and dropping the opacity again, so it's not too bright. Do the same thing here with the gloves or the mittens. Once again, new layer on top of those. Setting this as clipping mask. Hit these. Adjustments. Gaussian blur. Just pulling in some there. Looks like I got a little red dot there somewhere. There it is. Get rid of that. All right. I think I want a little bit more shadow here too in the package underneath that hand, so coming back in here, I'm just gonna, layer here with clipping mask, just kind of add in a shadow there. See, like that, I can add that in with the airbrush. It's just kind of getting used to it and knowing the pressure that you need. That's why that Gaussian blur is sometimes a little bit easier, especially to show off in videos. All right, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and add in some on the shoes now. So down to the shoes, new layer, that automatically set it as clipping mask. So it's in between them. Selected the color there for the beard. Just add just a tad bit over here. Gaussian blur on adjustments there. Nice flow to it. So that looks good. And then on the nose here, we're going to choose white outside here. And we'll go to the nose. We'll just go to the layer here with the pink on it. And you'll see here, I'm not even going to use the different layer and Gaussian blur. I'm just going to go ahead and just do this by hand to show you what this looks like. A lot of times this is what I'll do just to save time. This is kind of something you got to practice at though to get really good at knowing how hard to press and when to let up, so you've got just that nice flow that you get using the blur from the adjustments menu. But I think that looks good. All right, now I want to darken up some of these shadows that I've done. This is usually the last step that I'll use. So here I'll go into my colors palette and choose black. And we'll just start on the beard, I think. This one I'll go in on one of the clipping mask layers that I've already used, just with that soft airbrush. And once again, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you can always do it with a separate layer. I'm going to drop the opacity of this so I've got a little bit more control over it. I'm just going to darken in some of those shadows that I've already done. I don't want to get it too dark. This is, once again, where you just have to be careful as far as how much pressure you're applying. I'm just going really light right now. And this just kind of brings home all those shadows that we've already kind of locked in there before. And then once again, just kind of going back and forth to the places that I've done. So going on the package now, kind of hitting in another shadow here, adjusting the brush size as I go. Moving over to the mittens now. Changing my brush size once again as I go. You'll see there's a lot of back and forth. I'll do stuff, I'll undo it until I get the exact size that I'm looking for and the exact control that I want. Here I don't want to pull up too far into that part of the highlight there that I've done. I don't want those competing. There's that. Back up to the nose now. With this one, I don't really want to use black up here, so I will just select the nose color and I'll go in, I'll change this to more of a red and then go down to kind of like more of a maroon, a deep maroon color here. Just pull in more of a shadow here on the back. Right now I'm barely pressing on the screen at all. There's very little pressure. Going back to the beard here, just want to get a little bit darker there under the nose. All right. And there we go. I think that's pretty good. From here, honestly, on render designs, I will go back and forth so many times on these, just kind of adding to it. As you can see, this kind of approach takes a lot more time, and I think though overall, you get more of an impressive result. So definitely toy around with both different ways, see what you like, but that gives you a walkthrough of a couple of different options of how you can use these. Once again, really appreciate your purchase today. If you hung through this whole video over an hour long, believe me, I do appreciate it and hope you can get the most from these designs. Once again, just want to remind you, these do have full commercial rights with them. So any designs that you make using this brush pack, you're free to sell, whether it be on print-on-demand t-shirts, coloring books, mugs, totes. If you want to make finished designs and sell those as SVGs to the Cricut community, add some text to them, whatever you want to do, the sky's the limit. And this is one of those trends that I don't think is going anywhere and is only gaining more and more steam. It used to be just the Christmas gnome, and now we're seeing it for every single holiday. And that's why I wanted to add all of those different accessories in there so you could really kind of utilize it for, summer or Thanksgiving or Halloween, whatever you want to do. Other things to look into as well besides holidays, just kind of some insider tips and tricks. Gnomes have become a big thing as far as gifts. So gifts for nurses, doctors, teachers. You can kind of apply, the base designs to any of those professions. There's going to be a big demand for those and those niches too. So always be thinking of what you can do to put yourself out there. And that's it for today's video. As always, appreciate you guys watching. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely hop on over to YouTube. I'm over there. Let's Draw with BJ Dell. I'll link that down in the description to the video as well. Tons and tons of Procreate tutorials and videos about making money with your art. So that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. And until next time, keep creating.